Hello and welcome to Hops and Bros. This week, we're taking a look at champagne beers.
For an open window on a crappy world, Max and Chris from Ups and Brews. Ups and Brews. Welcome to Ups and Brews.
So New Year's is just around the corner, which means champagne will probably be part of your midnight plans to celebrate the coming of the new year, which is a kind of old tradition that I've done and a lot of people that I know do, and it's just to have champagne at midnight, you know, open a bottle, celebrate, be close to your friends and family at this time of year, which is kind of a cool tradition. From there, a lot of the beer makers, the beer industry, kind of tried to be a part of this tradition. Bose, a few years ago, had their champagne beer, which was pretty big, and it's pretty nice as a beer drinker to be able to have champagne on New Year's Eve and have it be a champagne style of beer. A lot of other Belgian breweries do this, but I haven't seen it a lot this year. Even Bose, it wasn't listed in the LCBO, which is kind of odd. I like that tradition. I like that beer. That beer was really clean, very crisp, and very champagne-like. And it was kind of an interesting take on beer drinkers to be able to, enjoy beer instead of wine on New Year's, which is not something we do often. That said, I do enjoy champagne, I do enjoy sparkling wine, I do enjoy different beverages, which I think a lot of beer drinkers do as well. As much as we only talk about beer and only talk about what we do, champagne and wine still part of it. A lot of winemakers refer to beer as it takes a lot of beer to make great wine, yet beer makers or brewers don't really have the opposite, which I think they should. They should enjoy different flavors. That's how you create better beers. Anyways, when it comes to champagne, there's a very specific area in France that makes it. The appellation is just for that area. Other countries have different appellations for it. In Spain, it's cava. In Germany, it's sect. But if you produce a sparkling wine, I want to call it champagne, outside of that region, you can't. It's proprietary, and there's a couple different reasons for it. The main one is the traditional method, or méthode champenoise, of creating this beverage. It has to do with bottle conditioning. Now, bottle conditioning is not alienated from beer. A lot of people do it, especially homebrewers. Homebrewers have to, or at least when you're starting, you do bottle conditioning, which means you add a bit of sugar, you add a bit of yeast to your bottles, you cap it, and you wait 2 weeks for it to re-ferment in that container. Now, the big reason is carbonation. One thing that separates wine drinkers from beer drinkers is carbonation. Beer has it, most wines don't. And it can affect your palate in a very specific way. It kind of auto-cleanses your palate. I love carbonation. I think it's a great way to enjoy beer, to enjoy any kind of beverage, but some people really don't like it. So bottle conditioning is a natural way to add carbonation to your beverage. The way it works is that your yeast actually creates carbonation while it ferments. So it creates alcohol, carbonation, a bunch of other stuff that I'm not going to get into, because those are the two big things that make beer. When it comes to fermented beverages, it's always pretty much the same. It's a fermentation thing. So you have a sugar source. In the case of beer, it's grain. In the case of wine, it's grapes. In the case of ciders, it's fruit. And then you ferment it for X amount of time to create your alcohol and create your beverage. Without fermentation and without that sugar source, you don't have the end result at all. But you can use that yeast to create a lot of different things. In the case of wine, you're just creating alcohol. But in the case of beer, you want to create carbonation. And in the case of champagne, you also want that carbonation. It happened as an accident where it was probably a bottle of wine that got, not infected, but inoculated with some more yeast. Maybe it still had a little sugar in it and it got carbonated. From there, they kind of analyzed that and started to recreate it because people got a liking to it. In the French army, one tradition was to saber your bottles. So you would have a champagne bottle and you would use your saber to open the bottle. It's pretty easy. You just follow the seam of the bottle, you have the back of a knife, and then with pressure, you just poop, pop the cork. It does break the bottle, but because of the pressure, no glass comes back inside. It's a very neat party trick, especially for your New Year's celebration. I would recommend doing it outside, and if you're in Canada, I mean, you know, you just do it outside real quick, then go back inside. Have your glasses ready, because it will start pouring immediately. But it's a great way to enjoy champagne, especially when this is for a celebration. Champagne generally is for a celebration. Now, the méthode champenoise, the traditional method to create champagne versus other types of sparkling wines, is very interesting. You use bottle conditioning, but you also use a technique called riddling. So while your wine is re-fermenting and creating that CO2, you want to kind of coax the yeast to go back into the top part of the bottle, close to the cork. Main reason is that you want to get rid of it towards the end of fermentation. These kinds of wine are generally fermented in cellars, which means that the temperature is a little lower. So your yeast is going to fall out of solution. Now, if you don't do that, you would have a murky kind of wine where the yeast is still in there. Could create it will create some sediment. It could create some cloudiness, some haziness in your wine, which for the longest time, that's how they did it until the widow, Madame Clicquot, developed riddling. So by doing that, by coaxing the yeast to flock out of solution in the cork, you can evacuate that yeast right before you end your secondary fermentation. So your yeast is all in the cork, you freeze that, and then you quickly open it. Naturally, there's pressure in there, so it kind of flies out. You refill it a tiny bit, cap it as soon as possible, as quickly as possible. You still have carbonation in that bottle. You let it re-ferment for a bit, but now your yeast is all out of it. So you have that carbonation, you have that liquid in, and you have that méthode champenoise, which is great because you want clear champagne. At least nowadays, you really want clear champagne. When it comes to beer, beer's a little different. Beer has that natural bottle conditioning that's been used for many, many years. And it's funny, when you look up champagne-style beers, most of them come from Belgium, which is a little bigger over there. Here, as I said, Bose was big on it, and I thought it was going to catch up. I thought other breweries were going to do it. But a champagne beer is basically a brewed beer. So it's just a beer that is fermented as much as possible. So you have virtually zero sugars left in there. And also, you have that natural carbonation. Natural carbonation is very important for this because the bubbles of natural carbonation is a little different than your forced carbonation. You have a different mouthfeel that comes from it. And something you can't recreate in forced carbonation. If you do forced carbonation, when you plug in CO2 to your bright tank to get that carbonation in, is a little more efficient. With your natural carbonation, you get a better mouthfeel. If you look at Saison Dupont, which it's funny how sometimes I have those English, those French words with a French accent, other times I have them with English accent. I constantly have to fight this because I do live in a part of Canada which is very English. And as soon as I go into French, they tend to not understand what I'm saying. So it's kind of weird for me to catch myself saying these things when I know the right way to say it. Saison Dupont. It's not Saison Dupont. It's just weird. Anyways, so those natural brewed beers, or those naturally carved beers, very dry, do exist and are better. So at that point, to create a champagne beer is mostly just branding. Which, now that I end this video on this note, I think it's kind of funny. It's kind of neat how branding really controls most of the beer industry, as you can create and recreate something that already exists, market it something different, and it kind of changes the enjoyment, or the perceived enjoyment of that thing. Neat. Anyways, I know I spent most of this video talking about wine and not talking about beer, but I think to really understand why champagne beers are important, you have to understand why champagne in general is important. It is a beverage that is used mostly for celebration, probably due to its cost point and due to its marketing behind it. At the same time, it's a great beverage, especially if you're a beer drinker and you've never had a sparkling wine or a champagne. Try it. you might like it. It has a lot of the same characteristics you might enjoy from beer, but in a wine form. We got to stop kind of separating the two industries of wine, beer, and then if you want to add spirits and I did this whole video without having a blank when it's not my first time recording this. I've recorded this 3 times where at some point I forget the word I'm looking for, which when Chris is around, it's kind of nice because then someone else takes up and the video continues. Ciders! Ciders is what I was thinking about. Anyways, so when it comes to wine, ciders, spirits, beer, a lot of people kind of separate between one camp or the other. You got to enjoy the whole thing to be able to enjoy the one thing you like most. Because if you don't try things in life, you won't get what you really like. You know, you'll think you like this one thing, but maybe you don't know why you like it, or maybe you'll like something better. Try things, travel, do things. It's a weird way to end this video. But anyways, if you like this video, please like, subscribe, share with your friends. And in this new year, try something new. You know, try something different. If it's in the alcohol industry, try something you haven't tried before. Or if it's just in life in general, if you're sitting there watching this video and you're like, man, I've never skied before, try it. You might like it. I know I don't, but a lot of people do enjoy it. So there might be, or there is something to it. Happy New Year, and we'll see you guys in the next year.